My name is Kerry Kremke with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska, Chief Security Officer there. What that role involves is involvement in our security practices, information physical security practices, the privacy, the education, the whole world that comes around protecting healthcare and healthcare information. The topic I wanted to cover today is something that's not talked a lot about out in the security world. You'll hear a lot of communications around protecting yourself, phishing campaigns, how to not get compromised, things like this. This topic is really about taking a step back and looking at your company's identity and understanding how is your company potentially your name being misused, your identity being misused. You'll hear me use cloning and impersonation, both terms today as we walk through. Okay, 3 different topic areas. I first wanted to talk through what's the threat. Then we'll talk a little bit about how do we check? How do you look and see if this might be happening? How can you keep eyes on what's happening with your company's brand and your company's name? And last is how do you respond? Or if something happens, what do you do with it? Or some options there. Jumping into what the threat is. Very broad categories here. What I'm going to do is give a very highlight here, and then I'm going to walk through, I think I have 6 or 7 different examples of how this has happened at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. The way the bad guys have impersonated us, the way they've tried to manipulate things using our name, to kind of put context to what the bad guys are doing with this. Through that part, I'll give you some tidbits on how you can protect yourselves and how you might be able to identify it. But then at the end, we'll summarize those items. So really 5 categories. First is phone calls. Inbound, outbound phone calls where they may be representing your customer or representing you to one of your vendors or things like that, ways that your name is being used. Number squatting is kind of like in a phishing world where they may try to emulate your website. We have instances where we have a handful of primary customer service numbers that people call to. The bad guys will take those numbers and switch just one number and register it and have it land on their call center where they'll act like they're us. They'll answer the call Blue Cross, but who knows where they go. So it's things like that. Website sites is a lot of the traditional, you see that in business email compromise or the different phishing things that you'll hear about from the other 2 sessions today. Directories, have you ever searched your business's name in Google Maps and say, is there someone else that has my location or my name, or Apple Maps, or the other business services? Those we'll talk about a little bit. Social media gets into both employees or protecting yourself, but then also protecting your business within those social media. If your business doesn't have a Facebook account, a Twitter account, I would suggest you get one. The main reason is to protect someone else from taking it. Get your identity out there before someone else tries to falsely do it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Email. I'm not going to go too much into this because I think the other guys will cover it a little bit. That is the whole concept of business email compromise. I'll show you a couple of examples of how it's happened to us, but it's really that fake emails, the way they're trying to impersonate, trying to manipulate people, that process. So let's get through some examples. This one was pretty interesting. I mentioned the business directories, Google Maps. This was probably 1.5 years ago. I don't exactly remember what it was, but we had the idea of we better go make sure. Let's search Google Maps. Let's see if we got there's Blue Cross Blue Shield. We found this listing that was in the middle of this cul-de-sac on 132nd and somewhere. It was like, first red flag. Okay, well, what's going on there? Started to wonder, do we maybe have someone someone internal that made a mistake? The more we started digging into it, there were pieces of it that kind of jumped out. That's not a Blue Cross domain name. BlueCross.com, that's not something we use. That phone number, nothing we could find there. So it really triggered us digging a little deeper into what's really going on here. The next step of it was we took that phone number and started doing some searches on the phone number that was listed. Everyone familiar with Manta? It's a big business directory, business services, basically how you can register who you are in your businesses. Located in Manta, this same reference with the same phone number, now we start having a name. Jack tied his name to it. This doesn't show it, but the address listed here was Douglas County Corrections Office. Kind of triggers, okay, something's being a smart aleck. But it really triggered us to start digging a little bit deeper. This scenario, or this story, ended up folding where Jack was part of a group that was selling malicious health insurance or fraudulent health insurance policies. So they were representing themselves as Blue Cross, trying to get in calls. They were calling companies, representing themselves as Blue Cross. If someone questioned, here's my website, here's my trying to sell insurance policies, high-level fraud, money coming in, nothing coming out the back end, that whole type of scenario. So it was kind of an eye-opening for us on some of those really what feel like fundamental things now that then we hadn't really dug into or thought about ways that people might be misrepresenting us. Yeah.
When did that occur?
That was about 18 months ago, if I remember right. This one, in a scenario like this, we ended up escalating to the Attorney General, Nebraska Attorney General, and then it escalated out of there. The fraud ring, I'll call it, might be using the wrong terms for being put on video, was based out of Florida, and there was stuff that happened with that. So fake social media. This was, I mentioned about building your company's social media accounts. This was an interesting scenario where we identified an individual that on LinkedIn had himself representative of the program manager of Blue Cross Blue Shield. 500 and some connections, you know. So he had built this identity, had built this network of connections, and it was a tool for social engineering for their other attacks. Basically, trying to use this to where then if they make a connection to someone, say they make a connection to me at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Nebraska, okay, 500 connections, you must be valid. I start to build that trust relationship that happens in fraud, that happens in these cases. He was using it to build those trust relationships and to do targeted attacks. So it really, this for us, set up that little flag that we wanted to make sure we're communicating to our employees. Don't blindly trust social media. Don't blindly trust that someone says they're with Blue Cross, that they're really with Blue Cross. There's other things that we can do in the background as a user to verify this rather than just blindly seeing or blindly assuming. So that's kind of one educational point that we carry out, something you can consider. But if you're LinkedIn users, you can search your company's name and say, who all says they work here? I don't know these people. You know, you can start to trigger that. It gets really hard in a bigger company, but in smaller businesses, you can pretty easily tell if this guy doesn't work for us, or this person doesn't. If you get a scenario like that, LinkedIn has services where you can come in and challenge things like this. To challenge, hey, this person is misrepresenting himself. There's different ways to manage that. Same with Facebook. Facebook, search your company's name. Sometimes you can find links of who works there. Did they really? Things like that to think about. Lookalike domains. This is where, this was an interesting situation where we had encountered fraudulent payments. Someone had manipulated where payments we were making were going to a fraudulent bank account. This was identified through our fraud processes. We get in touch with the bank. The bank freezes the account. Money can't come out of it. The bad guys went as far as creating this NebraskaBlueClaims.com domain. Something that looks like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. They send an email to the bank saying, hey, I'm touching base, reference this client. The payment is made for claims. Can you please release these funds? So they're trying to say, okay, well, Blue Cross told you to freeze it, but I'm from Blue Cross, I'm asking you to release it. And the amount of work that they go to getting the money somewhere, but then getting the money out, these guys are smart, and they work really hard. The key part of this, again, comes back to trusting. I'll talk about some other things later on where how you can monitor and try to look for these domains. When that domain gets registered, there's ways you can see it and get a flag saying, hey, someone registered this domain. It looks like me, but it's not. And things you can do with that.
So,
yeah.
Who do you report this to?
So, I'll cover that in a couple slides.
Okay.
That's okay. General, we engage with the FBI in some cases. FTC, there's a couple different governmental agencies that you report to. I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. Executive impersonation, if you've seen a presentation about BEC, business email compromise, or email fraud, or phishing, you've probably seen a scenario like this. This was an individual saying, I'm from the office of the CEO. This happened to be our CEO's name at the time. Sending a message to someone else internally, how are you doing today? I have a wire transfer. This is pretty common stuff out there. The reason it happens so much is it's pretty effective. A lot of cases, this stuff is effective. We've done significant education of the people in finance, our executive leadership, those key people that are making approvals like on wire transfers, saying, do a second validation, pick up the phone and call Steve, things like that. Payroll redirection. Has anyone ever heard of payroll redirection fraud? So this is something that's become more and more prolific over probably the past year. This is an example. Joe happens to be a coworker of mine. They impersonated Joe. This email looked like it came from Joe at JoePrush@NebraskaBlue.com and went to the HR department saying, good afternoon, please kindly inform me what I need to change my direct deposit. In a world without controls, the person in HR may reply to him and say, well, all I need is your new account information, I can provision that for you. The bad guy replies, as Joe again, please have it go to this bank account, this routing number. The bad guys provide that bank account. It may take one paycheck, it may take 2 paychecks. Eventually Joe's going to say, where's my money? I didn't get paid. But that money will be long gone by then. If you're a smaller company that say you do your own payroll, or a lot of companies may engage with payroll services, they're managing your payroll, managing checks. If you're paying someone to do it, I would be sure to ask them, what are you doing to validate changes? If one of my employees says, I want to change my bank account for my direct deposit, what are they doing to verify that? They should have secondary checks. If you're managing it in your own world, you get an email from someone, call them and ask them, say, hey, I got this. If you can give it to me, I'll do it. Do it over the phone, do it live, do things like that. Relatively small amounts of money are lost this way, but it's very effective. So the bad guys, for very little effort, will get a paycheck to Joe's, or maybe 2. It's not big money, but it's very effective money. Malicious software, malware delivery. This was a scenario where someone was misrepresenting one of our executive folks. So this person at Blue Cross had relationships with this Cheryl at a provider, a hospital system, something like that. So when she gets an email from this Blue Cross person, she's saying, oh, yeah, she's sending me this. Clicks on it. Installs malicious software. They had virus on this machine, and the story started at this provider's office. We were notified when can't remember what office this was for sure, called us and said, hey, we just had malicious software that came from you guys. We're like, oh, okay. When we start digging in, it's like, oh no, that wasn't from us. It was from someone impersonating us. There's technologies that I won't get into here, but that can help protect you here. And I'll give you some of those ideas a little later. So really, those are the examples. Those are real world things that have happened that we're seeing. How do you check? Trying to give some really easy things that can do. The most simple thing is search the company name. Go to Google, go to Yahoo, go down the list. Do some searches on company names or maybe affiliates or key leaders, key people in the company, and see what comes up. You never know when you're going to find your business that you say, that's really easy way. Searching social media is kind of the same. Getting through that process and seeing what you find. Google.com alerts, if you've never seen that, is kind of interesting. You can set up alerts through Google that if a new story, a new web page, something is published for your company, or whatever you put in, you can put in your own name, anything you want, you'll get an alert from Google. So it's kind of a nice marketing, brand management, brand monitoring tool. Don't ignore clues you get from the customers. If you get a call or someone in your team gets called and said, hey, I got this email and it looks funny, not just writing it off. We've found a lot of things that come to us from a customer reporting something, but once we start digging, we find this paper trail or this, this hammer trail that's behind it. Brand management services, depending upon the size of your company, there are services out there that do this for companies. You can pay someone to do brand monitoring that fits a lot of these different categories and things. How do you respond? This is part, how do you respond and how do you protect? Some of the things you can do, finding a reputable partner, finding someone that can help walk through if something happens, or finding someone that can help guide you. You're hearing a whole lot of stuff today. There are companies out there that can help guide, not necessarily do it for you, but maybe give you a roadmap of here are the top 5 things to focus, top 5 things. Contacting your service providers. Ask your email provider about mail protection. So there are technologies out there that help keep people from sending emails that look like they came from your company. There's industry terms like DMARC, SPF, they're technology processes. You can check with your providers, and a lot of times they may say, yeah, we do that, and it gives you that, okay, I'm covered. Or they may say, yeah, we can do that, or maybe a fee, but it's something at least check into. It can give you a level of comfort if you know they are offering those services. And things to do, notifying your customers. In the industry today, when you see data events, the tendency is better to over-report than under-report. For us in the healthcare environment, we would rather say we had an event and be transparent than to not say anything and have something come out in the news or things like that. So there's a lot about being transparent when things are happening. And alert your staff. Let your staff know what's happening. That's part of that transparency and communication. Reporting, ftc.gov/complaint, ic3.gov, some great resources that are out there for reporting things that happen, filing complaints. The Malicious website, you can file a complaint about it. The more the government's putting this information together, the more they can do to help support us and support us as an industry. A couple more great resources. ftc.gov/small business. They have put a ton of information. You'll get a couple booklets or a couple things that are provided today in the handout. A ton of information out there. If you're looking for anything, want to know more, want to dig deeper into any of these topics. And with that,